On today's episode of Locked On Wild, 3 things to take away from the loss to Dallas in preseason game number 2, directly from John Hines himself.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, we are your team every day. And we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we debut a new bit that will be coming to you after every game this season called 3 Things. 3 biggest takeaways to take from the previous game. And it will include a lot of the things that head coach John Hines has to say himself. So hope you enjoy. And this isn't going to replace postcasts after the game, so don't worry about that. This is another complimentary piece to the puzzle that we are going to use to break down games. And last night's game against the Dallas Stars, a 5-2 loss, pretty much expected based off of who was in the lineup for the Minnesota Wild and who was in the lineup for the Dallas Stars. A lot of Dallas regulars, few Minnesota Wild regulars, but a lot of prospects battling it out for potential roster spots on this team. And I want to start today with one of the guys that I think has really started to make a case for, if not a roster spot, at least being like the first guy up if injuries strike. And that is Graeme Clarke. And let's talk a little bit before we dive into what we saw from Clarke last night. Let's hear from John Hines directly on his thoughts about what Graeme Clarke brought last night and what he's brought so far to the preseason.
Should fans know about Graeme Clarke? Get him in an off-season trade through 2 preseason games. He's got a couple of goals.
Yeah, he's a good young player, good offensive instincts. Obviously, he's got a good release and has a couple goals. So, good young prospect, someone that we feel can fit the way that we want to play, and hopefully continues to have a great camp and continue to develop as a player.
Now, we knew coming in, because we talked about Graeme Clarke when he was first acquired from the New Jersey Devils for Adam Beckman. We knew that he profiled as a guy who is a shooter, is a goal scorer. But the thing that I think impressed me the most last night, if you recall the goal that he scored in last night's game, it was right between the face-off circles, and Clarke, he lost control of the puck for a moment. But everything that happened after that, I think, was really impressive and really indicative of the things that he could bring to this Minnesota Wild team, either as an injury call-up this season, or maybe he impresses to the point that he just straight up wins a roster spot. So he loses the puck. He quickly is able to find the puck and reposition himself. He's kind of skating to the left in front of the goalie, loses the puck, repositions himself, kind of maneuvers through, and in a very quick amount of time is able to turn and get not only an accurate shot, but top shelf. Like, he was able to blister that one into the top shelf area, right past the left shoulder of Jake Ottinger. And it was a thing of beauty. Like, that is not something that a lot of players have in their arsenal. And to be able to not only, get yourself in good position, get a good shot on net, but also to be able to accurately hit that part of the net. Saw a lot of other attempts throughout the course of the game last night that were not accurate, but you see so many players try to jam the puck through the 5-hole, like on the breakaway for Ben Jones. He goes right at Ottinger and tries to ram it through Ottinger's 5-hole. Like, you are you're hoping that you are able to beat a goalie's pads in those situations. And so it really impressed me, the fact that Clarke was able to, do that tight kind of pirouette, and to be able to, because I think Ottinger kind of keyed in on that okay, I'm guessing this shot is going to come low. And so he gets himself in position to try to fend off a low shot, and it just zips right past his ear. And so we got a chance to see, the whole package of what Graeme Clarke could bring to the table. All told, the numbers for Clarke in last night's game, he played 11 minutes, 32 seconds. He had 4 shots on goal. He had a blocked shot. He also had 3 hits. So very active. And now he has scored in the first 2 preseason games for the Minnesota Wild. I'm telling you, like, the reason that the Wilds brought him in was the exact reason that Adam Beckman got sent out. Is it didn't seem like Beckman was going to ever get that chance here. But it's starting to seem like Clarke is taking advantage of the exact same thing that happened to him in New Jersey, where it didn't feel like he was going to be able to crack the roster. He scored now in 2 straight games. And I want to just look as well at something that I think will tell the bigger story of what Graeme Clarke brought to the table. These are courtesy of The Athletic, and their Hockey Stat Cards is the account on X. And basically what they do is they just look at the game scores for particular players and how much they impact the game, both offensively and defensively. And if you look at Graeme Clarke's score here, he ended up actually leading the Minnesota Wild from the game score department. So I've got it up on the screen here. If you look at how he impacted most, it was individual offense led the team in terms of impact on offense, made some positive impact on defense as well. And so a lot of positive for Graeme Clarke. And, the other thing that I think is important to keep in mind through these preseason games, especially when you're talking about prospects, is you want players to stand out. You want guys to stand out from everybody else. And Graeme Clarke has done that through these first 2 games. He's done that. And it probably is going to be more difficult to do that once the regulars start to get more acclimated into the lineup. But the fact that he has been able to put this together for 2 straight games, that he is a shoot first, ask questions later type player, and really seems like somebody that wants to take advantage of an opportunity and make the team. It kind of gets you excited, because we didn't really know what to expect when he got here. But through 2 preseason games, he has made the most out of his opportunity, to say the least. And we do know there's probably about 1 spot, depending on how things play out. But, Graeme Clarke is a guy that may be able to change that. If his performance continues like this, you're going to have a hard time just seeing that type of performance and saying, yeah, we gotta send you right back down to Iowa. So Graeme Clarke, I think, was the big takeaway from last night's game. Impressive shot, but I think the puck skills and the puck instincts that he is able to bring is something else that can play at the NHL level. Because let's keep this in mind as well. The Dallas Stars played with a lineup last night that could have beaten a few teams in the NHL. It wasn't their full regular season lineup, but it could have beaten a few teams in the NHL with the amount of regulars that they had in the lineup. And so the fact that Clarke was able to do that against real-time NHLers, not guys hoping to get there, real-time NHLers, is another impressive piece to that. So that's takeaway number 1. next we will be talking about a guy who is known, I think, more for his speed, but is trying to add a little more to the table than just that. We'll take a look at Jakub Lauko and what he was able to bring to the table in last night's game. We'll also hear from John Hines in that aspect as well as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by Game Time. College football and the NFL are in full swing, which means that you are going to want to go see your favorite team defend their home turf against their hated rivals. And Game Time can help make the ticket buying experience as stress-free as possible. So you can spend more time enjoying the tailgate or just taking in the sights and sounds and smells of the arena. Plus, Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets easier for your favorite live events. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is also brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Plus, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. It doesn't even have to be a winner. Just place a $5 bet and you will get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. So get the NFL season started off right. Head to FanDuel.com today. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Reminder, the Locked on Wild sweepstakes continues. If you want to enter in for a chance to win 2 tickets to see the Columbus Blue Jackets in action on October 10th, opening night, send a screenshot proving that you are subscribed to Locked on Wild on YouTube and add your name into the email. Send it to lockedonwild@gmail.com and you're entered in. We got a few more days for you to be able to enter in, so don't delay because we're going to be drawing the winners soon. And all you got to do, again, screenshot proof that you are subscribed to Locked on Wild and send it with your name to lockedonwild@gmail.com. All right, let's get to the second thing from last night's game, and this is an interesting one as well because Jakub Lauko brought in from the Boston Bruins to try to replicate what Brandon Duhaime brought to the table, and other than Graeme Clarke, he had the second biggest impact offensively of anybody on the Minnesota Wild side of the ice. And so let's hear John Hines' thoughts on what Lauko brought to the table in last night's game.
Same thing with Lauko, back-to-back games where not only has he scored, he's got an edge to his game.
He's got an edge. He's got a really good engine. You know, obviously he scored the 2 goals, which is nice, and you need that. You need scoring throughout your lineup. But to me, I like his energy. His attention to detail is good. He's a big, strong, powerful player. He plays that way, and he's an impact. He impacts the game on the score sheet, and he impacts the game with how hard and how quick he plays.
And Lauko as well, with a couple of goals so far in this preseason. And he talked to Kevin Gorg, I believe it was after the first period, talked about, you know, he has always been a player that has played with that physical edge and the speed elements. But he has said, and I really liked this because you don't get it a ton from players, you know, being honest and forthright about the things that they're trying to add to their game. He talked about how this season especially, he wants to add more offense to his arsenal and wants that to be the thing that he really improves upon the most this season. And you look at what he brought to the game in last night's game. He played just under 15 minutes. He had a goal. He had 2 shots on net and 3 hits. And he played on the penalty kill. He led the Minnesota Wild forwards in terms of time on the penalty kill and was 1 of 3 in the faceoff circle. But that goal from him as well, from Lauko, was an impressive one because, it was kind of in that between the faceoff circles area. And it was just a nice solid wrister that he was able to get a lot behind and was able to get it past Jake Oettinger to give. Or actually, I think no, he scored first. Okay, so Lauko's goal was against Jake Oettinger. Graeme Clarke's goal was against Casey DeSmith, who came in the third period in relief of Oettinger. So Dallas worked both of their goalies in. We got the full Filip Gustavsson experience. More on Gus coming up in a little bit. But you look at some of the numbers from Lauko as well. From the looks of it, he had a Corsi for percentage of 55.5, which is pretty good. I know he was playing more of an elevated role in this game with the amount of prospects that were in, but I like the confidence, and he talked about too, because let's be honest, that first period was pretty brutal for the Minnesota Wild, but he talked about how important it was to really come out swinging in the second period, and just because the Wild were playing a team that had most of their regulars in the lineup, he said you can't be intimidated by a challenge. You got to be ready to go against whoever it is, no matter who's on the other side of the ice. And so I like hearing a lot of those things from a guy who, and it is interesting because you look at the guys like Graeme Clarke and Jakub Lauko, and you look at how hard they're playing and how much they're trying to make an impact. And I think those guys that are roster bubble guys or fourth line guys, because we saw this with Brandon Duhaime too, and we saw this with Connor Dewar. I don't think those guys ever lose that sense of I have to always be putting my best out there on the ice because my spot in the lineup is not guaranteed. And I really appreciate players who bring that to the table on a nightly basis and are going to just give you 110% of what they have. They may not factor a ton into the final outcome, but Lauko was a 6-goal scorer last season, and if he can improve offensively and really works on that this year, works on his shot, paired with the speed that he brings to the table, you're talking about that they could be a bump into double digits for goals, 10, 12 goals. That is a sizable bump for a fourth line guy. And considering the production that the Wild got from that spot in the lineup last year, that'd be a huge upgrade for Minnesota. So I like what Lauko's brought to the table. I'm glad he's getting penalty kill work here, because he really didn't with the Boston Bruins based on how deep they were at that spot with all the forwards that are iconic players that take up those spots. So glad he's getting the opportunity to do that here. And he has been very noticeable through the first 2 games of the season. I don't think he was at risk coming into the season. I don't think he was at risk of not making the team, but he definitely has shown that he can bring something to this roster, especially on that fourth line. So we'll finish by talking about Filip Gustavsson, because it was a roller coaster game for Gus, especially early. But considering the lineup he had in front of him and the lineup that was going against him on the other side, we can't really be surprised by that. And so we'll hear from John Hines as to what he thought of Filip Gustafsson's game in last night's 5-2 loss to the Stars as we finish up our 3 Things edition of Locked On Wilds after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Indeed. We are driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Plus, listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. One final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Just a programming note, we will be resuming live postcasts on Tuesday. So we'll have both the games against Chicago next week, and then after that we'll be full steam ahead. And I'm really intrigued to see, as we expand this 3 things as kind of a bonus complimentary episode after games as well. It's going to be interesting to see as we get into the season, as things change. Really going to have a lot of fun, I think, diving into those as well, getting John Hines' thoughts and being able to kind of react to those based off of what happened in the game. Let's talk about Filip Gustavsson, because honestly, I can't fault Gus on those first 2 goals really at all. Now, beyond that, yeah, you'd like to see your goalie make a few of those saves. The one where Jamie Benn was right in front of the net, again, like, if you're the Wild, you got to get that guy out in front. Got to keep Ben from just parking out in front of the net. So again, those lean more towards the team. And, this is an interesting kind of piggyback off of the goalie wins discussion. But for John Hines, he was looking at a few different things in last night's game. And so let's take a listen to some of the things that Hines was looking for and what Filip Gustavsson showed him in last night's game.
How valuable can this be for a guy like Gustafsson who's trying to come in and have a good camp and get off to a really good start this year?
I thought it was good. Gus said I had a really good summer. As I said, he's come in, and I think he's in a really good mindset. I really liked his work ethic and his play in the practices. And then it's good for him to come into this game, on the road. And, coming in, you're going to need him to be able to play well. And I thought he did a good job. He held serve. We gave up some odd man rushes in the second, and I thought he held serve. I loved his competitiveness down low, fought through screens, rebounds, second efforts in and around the net front. That's what we need to see from him. So it's positive.
So let's talk about that first goal. You had just the weirdest deflection I've ever seen in my life. Kyle McDonald coming into the defensive zone on the left side of the zone. So he's skating in. He tries to pass it to the left, because if I recall correctly, I think Dallas had maybe a 3-on-2 or something like that. He tries to pass it to the left of the zone, he tries to pass it to the right. Tries to pass it to the right of the zone. Marco Rossi gets a stick on the puck, and it deflects straight up in the air, like 10, 12 feet in the air, and just is on a trajectory to go into the net. But the problem is Filip Gustavsson was tracking where he anticipated the pass was going. It never got there. And so that's just one of those. I mean, if Gustafsson is able to see that deflection, he makes that save no problem. That's a glove save, and that's an easy one. But he was he was getting set across the way after the McDonald pass, and so that's a tough one for an NHL goalie, just because I don't think anybody really anticipates that the puck is going to do that sort of a thing. So that was unfortunate. The Miro Heiskanen goal, 2 Stars players in front of the net, 2 Wild players trying to fend them off, and they weren't able to. And it was just a good play by Heiskanen off the initial shot to deflect it up and over Gustafsson's shoulder. And Gustafsson, he was in good position, like he had fended off that side of the net. Just, I don't know, maybe really the only thing he could have done was tried to get a little taller, but that is a tough one too, because it's not as if he was, on one side of the net and all of a sudden the puck deflects to the next. He was in position on that shot. And the thing that I really take away, he looked good on the penalty kill. Like, Dallas had a couple of penalties last night, couple power plays, and he did a really good job because Dallas power play, as you would expect, held the zone for a majority of the power play time. So they got a lot of good looks on the net. But Gustafsson didn't bend, didn't break. And then, the Marchment goal was... So Marchment was in the right face-off circle. Liam Ogren was in front of the net, kind of helping try to keep it clean. So I'll give him props for that, because that's something that was an issue for most of the game. And so props for him to just try to keep that area clean. He did see Marchment lining up for the shot, so he tried to go out to intercept, just didn't get there in time. And Marchment is a good goal scorer at the NHL level. And so that would maybe be one that you want your goalie to, that you feel like, okay, Gustafsson should get that one. But I think if you get somebody to Marchment a little earlier, you can prevent that shot. And then the Jamie Benn goal, he's camped out right in front of the net. And there was, I think, one player, I think it was Cameron Crotty, that was out there trying to move him off. But Jamie Benn's got a few inches and a few pounds on Cameron Crotty. And so he ends up scoring there. And then the final goal that the Stars scored was on an empty netter. So, at this point, I think the most important thing for a goalie in the preseason is that they get the reps. They face the shots. It's like a pitcher in spring training. You are putting pitches in particular spots and seeing what hitters do to them. Like, I don't necessarily panic because you see 4 goals given up, considering that Dallas had most of their regular lineup in the lineup. So I don't necessarily get concerned about the number of goals against. Like I said, the thing that I pull is that Gustafsson was really good when Dallas went on the power play. And, beyond those 2 goals that the Stars scored in the first half of the first period, I thought he did a good job of really tightening things up, because the Wild did not possess the puck a ton in the offensive zone. They got outshot. I think it was 39-25. And the shots in the first period, I think, were something like 14-4. So your goalie is just facing a torrent of shots, and a lot of times all you can do is just try to kind of hold serve. So it's all about, especially in preseason game number 2, it's all about just getting the reps, facing the shots, and kind of getting yourself back into hockey mode. And so those are the 3 things that I really took from last night's game. Honestly, the biggest one to me, the biggest one that stood out, was Graeme Clarke. I know the big talker for last night's game will be Riley Heidt. And I saw a lot on Twitter about, people saying, well, he's not ready. Again, I'm not going to take a ton, but I do stand by my statement that you like to see guys separate themselves. This is why all these prospects are playing together, is because the Wild want to see which of those players separate themselves from the rest of the group. Graeme Clarke has done that. Honestly, Travis Boyd has been he has played well in these first couple of games. And so those are the things that we look for at this point. Not super concerned about the likes of Marco Rossi or Murat Huznadinov, because we know that those guys are going to make the team. Liam Ogren, I liked that he played with Rossi and that they got to build up some chemistry together. I want to see Riley Heidt get another opportunity with some more of the regulars, but at the end of the day, the players that advance through the latter stages of training camp are the ones that separate themselves. And so Graeme Clarke did that, and I look forward to seeing what else he has in store as the preseason rolls along. That is going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to hit that like button on YouTube so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week, because we got a lot coming at you as we get closer to the start of the season, including new episodes each and every day of the week. So make sure to stay tuned as we guide you through the rest of the preseason. We got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.